Kakadosh Boker Tov, we're continuing with Daf Vav Amud Aleph 681. So what we were trying to say yesterday was, Ika De'amre, there was an opinion that said, Hani Chalaman Damar, Davara Gorem Mamon Lav Kimon Dami. This is good according to the Mandamar that says that something that causes money is not considered money, right? So that's why now we're on Vav Amud Aleph 681. Hainu Diitzich, that's why you need the pasuk of the Ribui of Loi Matzeh, right? In order to teach you the Chumrah by Chametz, that it's prohibited for a Jew to have in his possession Chametz of Goyim, that he accepted upon himself responsibility. Ella lemandamar, according to the mandamar that says kimamon dami, that it is considered money. Lo yimatzeh lamale. Why does he need lo yimatzeh? Why does he need this pasuk? So he says over here, why? Because you already know lo yireh lechaseor, you're not allowed to see it. So why do you need lo yimatzeh? That you shouldn't find it. You shouldn't see it. That's it. So he says the Gemara, itzrich, you need it. Why? Salka daita chamina. I would have thought to say hoil v'chiyite, right? Hadar be'ene. Since the entire time that the chametz is there be'en, which means you could actually see it, that it's not going to be stolen or lost. So therefore, you are obligated to give it back the same way. So therefore, lo birshutekai, it's not yours. Which means that if it's still there, you would have to give it back the same way. You can't just come and start paying him for it. You only pay the guy only if it was lost or stolen or things like that, but not if it's still there. Kamashwalan comes to teach you, achumra by the chametz, that as long as the Jew is obligated to give it back, it's still in his possession. And therefore, even though it's still there 100%, it's still going to be prohibited. Okay? So they asked from Rava. Behemat arnuna. This is a behemah which is obligated in taxes. Even in Israel today, but they call it arnona. I don't think they call it arnuna. Here it says arnuna. Behemat arnona, which is basically a tax that goes to the king. Is it obligated in bechorah or not? Now again, this has to do with a concept of money of a goy, which is found by a Jew. So says the Gemara, right? Now why? Because basically the question is, the vladot, are they like yad nochri be'emtza, and therefore it's going to be patur or not? Okay? So if you could come and you could pay off the taxes with money instead of the animals, lo kami bailan de chayav, so then there's no safek that the bechor is going to be chayav because you could pay with money and then you're obligated the animal, so you're going to be obligated. When's the question? If you cannot pay him money, and you have to actually give him the actual money in itself. What's halacha? Do I say that since this animal has to go to the king, so therefore the vladot, the children, are going to be patur from the bechorah? Or I'm going to say no. So says the Gemara, he tells him, petura mina bechorah, it's going to be patur. So ask the Gemara, I thought we learned that it's going to be chayevet in bechorah. So says the Gemara, hatam the matzim salekle, there that the malchut, that you can actually pay it off with money. So that's why it's going to be chayav bechorah, which means the fact that you could pay money and you're not going to pay the animal, that animal still technically is yours. So therefore the bechorah or any animal that comes from it is going to be 100% yours because you could get rid of it, you could redeem it with money. Okay? Ikadam, there are those that say, Amar Rava, Rava says, Behemat anuna patura mina bechorah. The behemat anuna is going to be patura from the bechorah. The afagav the matzim salekle, and even though you could get rid of it by paying it off, isat arnuna, right? Chayevet bechala. The isa, which is basically, again, we're talking about dough of the king, is chayav bechala. You have to give chala from that. Even though you cannot get rid of it, meaning that even though this dough is going to go for sure for the king, you have to take off chala from this dough. My time, what's the reasoning? Why is it that by isa, you're chayav, meaning by the dough, you're obligated to take off afrashat chala, even though it's going 100% to the king and you can't even redeem it. And by the animal, right, you're going to be petura, even though, right, you could redeem it and you could give him the money. So says the Gemara, behema eats lekala, meaning by an animal that the king comes and he puts a tax on it, everybody knows that he puts a tax on it. And therefore, we're not going to have a problem if we're going to exempt it. Isa lekala, but by the dough, it doesn't have it, nobody knows about it. So therefore, if you see a Jew coming and all of a sudden, what he's going to do is he's going to start eating from it without afrashat chala, he's going to think that he's eating tevel. So because of that, in order not to do that, he's going to be obligated to take off chala from it. So Tanu Rabbanan, we learned in the Braita, imagine right now you have a goy, that he comes into the chatzer of a Jew, in the courtyard of a Jew on Pesach, and he has batzek of chametz in his hands. So obviously the Jew, which is the owner of the chatzer, is not obligated to get rid of the chametz. Right? Why? He doesn't have to do it. Because we said lo yireh lecha, right? It's only lecha, it's yours. Here it doesn't belong to you, it belongs to the goy. If he do it so, but if he actually made it as a pikadon to you, which means that he gave it to you like a collateral, a deposit, which now you're obligated in the responsibility, zakuk levayed, you are obligated, right, to get rid of it on Pesach. Yichel lo bayit, but if you designated a house for it, which means you designated a special place for it, En zakuk levayer, you don't have to destroy it. Shneimar, but it says pasuk lo yimatzeh. My comment, what is it? Where do you see from the words lo yimatzeh that if you designated a house for it, that you don't need it? And by the way, that's the reason why you have to designate places for the chametz. Meaning, even nowadays they come and they ask you, where is the chametz found? And you designated a place for it. And not only did you designate it, you're actually renting out the space to the goy. Meaning, when nowadays we do mechidat chametz, we're not only just selling the chametz, we're selling the chametz and we're renting out the spaces where the chametz is found. So you have to designate the place. So how do you see that from the pasuk of lo yimatzeh? Amar Rav Papa says, a reisha kai. We found it from the reisha. V'hachi kamen. This is what it means to say. If the goy comes and he gives it to him as a collateral, right? Zakuk levayer. He's obligated to destroy it. Remember, it says pasuk lo yimatzeh. Okay, so therefore it doesn't say lecha. There it just says lo yimatzeh, which means it's a sur to be mimatzeh by a Jew, even chametz of other people, if he has obligations on it, if he has the responsibilities on it. That means a Jew cannot have the responsibilities on it, and you cannot find it. And there we do not say the concept of lecha, that has to be yours. Ravashi comes and he says, no. Le'olam ha-seifa kai. Really, be'emet, we're going on the seifa. Ve'achi kamer. This is what it means to say. What does this mean that the pasuk is going on the seifa? Yichel lo bait. If you designated a house for the chametz, en zakuk levayer, you don't have to get rid of the chametz. Shneimar, but it says in the pasuk, yimatzeh bevatechem. What does it mean? Right? Lo yimatzeh bevatechem. You're not allowed to find in your house. But this is not yours. Why? But since you designated a house for it, when the goy is coming, he's going to his own house. Meaning, once you designated a house for this, it becomes your own house. Okay? So says the Gemara, Lememra de schirutu kanya. Are you going to tell me that schirut, which is basically renting out the property, you're going to acquire? He says, Vatzna, we learned in the Mishnah, Af bimkom shamru laskir, right? Even in a place where he said you're allowed to rent out a house to a goy. We're not talking about just renting it out to a goy. They're going to come and they're going to put avodah zarah in the house. Right? So he says, if you're going to tell me, right? And it says, you're not allowed to bring an abomination, right, in your house. So he said, now if you're going to tell me this schirut kanya, that schirut is going to be koneh, and that means when he rents it out, it's 100% his. So then he should be permitted to rent out a house to a goy. Why? Because he's bringing the avodah zarah to his own house. It's not bringing it into your house. So answers the Gemara, Shanehacha, it's different over here. What does the Torah say? Lo yimatzeh, you cannot have it found. What does that mean? Chametz, which is found easily in your hands. But this is not easily in your hands because since you went and you rented it out, so therefore it's not found easily in your hands. But to do with the other thing, which was basically about renting out the house, there's nothing to do with finding in your hands easily or not. It has to do with you don't want it. You don't want any goy to bring into your house, a toeva, in betecha, into your house. Okay? Next, this is to do with bedikat chametz. Amar Rav Yudah Marav, says Rav Yudah Marav, hamotzeh chametz ve'yotov b'yom tov. If you find chametz in your house on Yom Tov, kofeh alav et hakli. So you're going to put a utensil on top of it, and you cover it, in order that nobody should forget and eat it on Pesach. So Amar Rava says, im shel ekdesh, if the chametz belongs to ekdesh, eno tzarich, you don't have to cover it. My time, what's the reason? But anyway, you're not going to touch it. But since you know it's ekdesh, you're never going to come and forget and start eating it. It's ekdesh, so you don't have to worry about it. The Amar Rav Yudah Marav says, also the chametz of the goy, again, you designated the place. Still, what you have to do is you have to make a mechitza of 10 tfachim, which means you have to make a type of a mechitza in order to remember that you're not going to come and you're not going to forget. Right? That's the reason why, by the way, we put it in cupboards and we close it up and we do all these things, because you need a mechitza of 10 tfachim for a eked, and it's not just enough stam to cover it with a kli, right? You need to make a eked. Ve'im shel ekdesh, but if it belongs to ekdesh, eno tzarich, you don't need to. My time also is because people are already segregated from it, they're not going to touch it. The Amar of Yudah Marav says, imagine right now you're going on a boat, or a yotze b'shayira, which means that you're going out on a caravan. Kodem shoshim yom, before 30 days before the Pesach, en zakuk levayer, you don't have to do b'dikat chametz. But if it's within the 30 days, till shoshim yom zakuk levayer, you do have to do b'dikat chametz. Amar Abaye comes and he says, right, Hada Amarta, that which you just said now, another halakha to do with b'dikat chametz of the 30 days before and afterwards, right? It says, right, Tol Shoshim, Hada Amarta Tol Shoshim Yom Zakuk Ver Lo Amran Ela Shedatol Lachzor. That's only if you wanted to come back. Aval En Datol Lachzor. But if you don't want to come back, En Zakuk Ver, you do not have to actually do it, even though you're not going to come back. So says the Gemara, Rava says, what are you talking about? If you want to come back during Pesach, then even from Rosh Hashanah you have to do it. Because if I already know that I'm coming back on Pesach, and I'm going to come in the middle of Pesach, so that even on Rosh Hashanah, I'm going to have to do B'dikat Chametz. So make sure that when I come back, I'm not going to have Chametz there. And Rava, but rather Rava argues on Abaye, and he says, which said, before 30 days, you don't have to do it. That's only if you don't want to come back. But if you do want to come back, even from Rosh Hashanah, you have to do Biur Chametz. The Gemara is going to ask, but says the Gemara, Rava is going according to his reasoning. The Amar Rava, Rava says, if a person comes and he makes his house into an otzar, which means like into a machsan, into a storage house of granaries. So kodem shoshim yom, if it's going to be before 30 days, and zakuk kaver, you don't have to do it. Because that during that time, he's still not going to be chayav and biur chametz, right? And then by the time he's going to come to that time, it's going to be like chametz that a mapolet, avanim fell on top of it, and that's it. Tosh shoshim yom, if it's going to be within the 30 days, zakuk kaver, you do have to do it, right? So and then afterwards, you're going to come and take the tevuah. So therefore, it comes out, right? The kodem shoshim yom, and even before the 30 days, Nami lo amram, we also didn't say it. Ela shen dato lefanoto, only if you didn't want to take it out of the on Pesach. Dato lefanoto, but if you didn't want to take it out, afilu kodem shoshim yom, Nami zakuk, you do have to do it. So therefore, what we're trying to say here is that in order that you're not going to be over on bali matzbalire in Pesach. So it says the Gemara, hani shoshim yom, what is these 30 days exactly? Right? Why is it dafka 30 days? Maybe it's 2 months, maybe it's 3 months, maybe it's 10 days, 15 days. Why dafka 30 days? So it says the Gemara, you're going to ask and learn the halachot Pesach before Pesach 30 days. And the Shbag Omer says, right, shte Shabbatot, it's only going to be 2 weeks. So we're not going to do 2 weeks, we're going to do 30 days, right? That's the concept. My Tama, Tanakama, what's the reasoning of Tanakama that he says it's going to be, right, 30 days before Pesach? So he says, Vava Mubet 6b, he says, Sharei Moshe Omer bePesach Rishon Mazir Pesach Shni. 30 days, we learned from Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was on Pesach Rishon, and he was warning Bnei Yisrael and teaching them about Pesach Sheni, that if you were Tameh on Pesach Rishon, you're going to bring it on Pesach Sheni. Okay? So he says, Shenemar B'zez in Pasuk, Yasu Bnei Yisrael to Pesach B'moadah, the Bnei Yisrael are going to do the Pesach B'moadah. Uchtiv Vayinashim Asher Yitum Nefesh Adam. Right? V'Rashbag, according to Rashbag, Amalechai, he's going to tell you, the idea, the Pischa, since we're already talking about Pesach, that's why he continued speaking, but it's not that you have to actually do it. So then, okay, fine. So therefore, he's deferring and he's saying, no, you don't need the 30 days, because Moshe Rabbeinu was talking about Hilchot Pesach. He's already teaching Hilchot Pesach, teach all of them. But you don't need to do it a month before. But if you already started, so continue. But according to Rashbag, so why does he say 2 weeks? My time at the Rashbag, he says, Sharei Moshe Omer Berosh Chodesh, right? But Moshe Rabbeinu was on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, Umasira LePesach, and he was teaching the Pesach. Shenemar, but it says in the Pasuk, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodeshim. וכתיב ונצוות, דברו בני ישראל, עדת בני ישראל למון, ועשו חודש ועשו, וייחו להם איש צלע ודף. So what's going on? Moshe Rabbeinu, right? What happened? They both learned it from Moshe. The first one, Tanakama is learning from Moshe Rabbeinu on Pesach Rishon to Pesach Sheni. The second one, Rashbag, is learning from Moshe Rabbeinu from Rosh Chodesh Nisan, when we read Parashat HaChodesh, which is a Chodesh Zedachem, Rosh Chodeshim, until Pesach, which is 2 weeks. It's not some more. Okay? So says the Gemara, Mimai Devrei She'ar Chakai. How do you know that it's talking about Rosh Chodesh? Maybe it's the 4th or 5th. So it's another pasuk. By the Hashem Moshe b'midbar Sinai b'shana sheni, Hakadosh Baruch Hu speaks to Moshe b'midbar Sinai in the 2nd year, b'chodesh Rishon in the 1st of month, saying, "Uchtiv yasu b'nei Yisrael b'moadah." From the fact that it says b'asar chodesh b'rabbi mitzvah, so therefore he says that we're talking about 2 weeks beforehand, right? Why? Because that's what he says. He's talking about from the beginning of the month, right? B'chodesh Rishon. And then he's talking about that on the 14th of the month. How do you know that we're talking about there on Rosh Chodesh? You know, maybe we're talking about already the 4th or the 5th. So I'm Rav Nachman ben Yitzchak, Atya midbar midbar. So they don't exert Sheva midbar midbar. Ketiva Achad certain over there midbar Sinai, right? V'yasu ben Yitzchak bezam mo'adav Sinai. Ketiva Etam certain. On the 1st day of the 2nd month. So just like over there, it's the 1st day, which is basically Rosh Chodesh. So 2 years, son, Rosh Chodesh. Capish until here? Everyone's clear? Fine. So says the Gemara, the Nichto Bereisha the Chodesh Rishon. Yeah, thank you. So he says, so why don't we just write in the 1st of the month? The Hadar Nichtov the Chodesh Hashni, and then write the 2nd of the 2nd month, right to the 1st of the 2nd month. So Amar Rav Menashe Bar Tachli Mishmei Rav says Rav Menashe Bar Tachli in the name of Rav. So Tomeret en Mugdam Meuchar b'Torah. From here we learn that there's no Mugdam Meuchar l'Torah. That means sometimes the Torah goes out of order. Okay, because basically we were asking why didn't we start teaching about the halachot of Pesach, of the Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and then the one of the Pesach itself for the Pesach Sheni. But rather, again, it's the same concept. So Amar Rav Papa comes and he says, Lo amran ela bitrei inyane. He says, what are we talking about? Only in two inyanim, in two parashiot. But sometimes the Torah comes and is going to be makdim, right, one to another. Aval bechad inyan, in other words, one thing. Maide mugdam mugdam, maide muchar muchar. That means like this. When we're talking about two different concepts, en mugdam muchar b'Torah, sometimes it's written before is afterwards. For example, we just saw this to do with the death of Ishmael recently in the parashiot. The death of Ishmael was after the entire story of the birth of the twins of Esav and Yaakov. And Esav even got married. He got engaged, right? That Ishmael was the one that got him engaged to his daughter. And then he passed away between the engagement and the marriage, and then it was the brother, right? But he was alive. But when is the death of Ishmael brought down? The parasha before, the end of the parasha before Toledot. But only in Toledot were they born. So again, because it's not in the order, which means sometimes you will have that even though it already mentioned the death of Ishmael, if you just do a very simple calculation, Ishmael was alive during that time. You understand? So therefore, obviously, it's not the same. So it says here, to do with two different inyanim, and mugdam muchar b'Torah. To do with one inyan, there is whatever is mugdam muchar muchar. Dilo temehachi, but if you're not going to say that, klal ufrat en bichlal mashe beprat. We have one of the things of the 13 teachings of Rabbi Ishmael that we say in the morning is klal ufrat uchlal, right? So he said, what is klal ufrat? So when you have a general rule and then a specific, en bakelal el mashe beprat. So the general only has that which is in the specific. Because since you first had the general, then the specific. So the specific is teaching you, it's narrowing it down to come and tell you exactly what it's talking about. So says the Gemara, Dilma Pratu Klalu. Because if you're going to tell me that there's no Mugdam Mu'uchar in the Torah, so why are you calling it a Klalu Frat? Maybe it's a Pratu Klal, right? So therefore it's the exact opposite, right? It's a Prat and then a Klal. So if you have a specific and then a generalization, so now you go by the generalization, but it open up the doors to everything else. The two, and furthermore, Pratu Klal, Nasa Klal Musaf, right? Ala prat. When you have a pratu klal, the klal is mosif. So dima klal ufratu. Maybe it's the opposite. So yachi, if so, afilu b'tzerinami. If you're already going to tell me that it has to be this mugdam, whatever's mugdam is mugdam, whatever's muchar in one inyan. So therefore, even in two inyanim. Hani chala mandamar. That's good according to the mandamar that says klal ufrat amluchakim zemizeh and danino to bichlal prat. That when you have a klal ufrat which are further away from each other, so then you're not going to judge them with a klal ufrat klal. So then that's going to be okay. But according to the mandamar that you could judge them, you could do a pratu klal ufrat and all these things when you are further away. Michael, what are you going to say? So it says the Gemara, afilu mandamar, even according to the mandamar danin, that you do judge them, hanamil bechad, that's only going to be with one topic. But with two different topics, and danin, we don't do klal ufrats. Okay? Fine. 2 dots. We're going back to the dikat chametz. We're almost finished. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav. Says in the name of Rav. Habodek tzarich sheivatel. When you do birikat chametz, you have to do bitul chametz as well. My time on what's reasoning? Inema, if you're going to tell me mishum pirurim because of the crumbs, halo chashiv, it's not important. So why do you have to do bitul chametz when you do birikat chametz as well? It's not chashiv pirurim. If you're going to tell me that since they are watching it, all the other things in the house, because you're locking up the door basically, right? And therefore, so chashiv, so then it does become something important. Tanya, we already learned in the Braita. Sofet te'enim, which are basically bad figs, okay, that they're not ripened yet. So what happens? What happens now if you're going to be watching over your field because of the grapes? So fe'anavim, or you have the grapes that they're not ripened, but you are coming in because of the kitrim and the midot, because of the pumpkins and the cucumbers. So bizman shebalabait mikpid alen, if the balabait is going to be makpid on these things, asul mishum gezel, you're not allowed to touch it because of gezel. V'chayavim maaser, and they're chayavim maaser because now that it's not hefked, so he has to give off maaser. Bizman she'em balabait makpid on them, but if the balabait is not going to be makpid on them, mutarim mishum gezel, you're allowed to come and take it. You could do whatever you want with it. And paturim in maaser, it's patur maaser, because there's no maaser on hefked. So since everybody could come and take it, so there's nothing there. So Amar Rava, so it's basically, what are we trying to say from here? We see from here that every single thing that a person is not makpid on it, even though he's being meshameret, which means he's watching over it, it's like hefker. So the same thing, these pirurim, these crumbs, even though you're watching over your house, but it's not chashuv, so therefore it's batel. So why do you have to do bitul? So Amar Rava says, there's a famous halacha also, that the reason why you have to do bitul is because maybe you're going to find a gluska yafa, a good piece of bread, or a good piece of whatever it is, and then you are going to think about it to actually eat it. So because of that you are machshiv, it's not about pirurim. Pirurim, you do bitul. We're talking about the gluska yafa, the big piece of bread. So says the Gemara, fine. So make it batel, even if you do find it. So the Gemara, maybe you're going to find it after it's already the time of the Yisur. So if it's not in your Reshut, and therefore you can't do bitul. The Amar Rabbi Elazar, says Rabbi Elazar, there are two things which are not in your Reshut, but the Torah made it like in your Reshut. And this is it. When you go to and make a pit in a public domain, it's not your domain. It's a public domain. It's public property. But the Torah made it like your Reshut. And therefore, if somebody falls inside of it, you're going to be held responsible. Number two, chametz. The chametz, after the 6th hour, it's not in your property because it's a surbanah. It's not really yours. But what do we say? The Torah made it like yours. So if it's still in your possession, you're going to be obligated. So says the Gemara, fine. Annul it in the 4th or 5th hour in the morning. Why do you have to do it in the nighttime? And so the Gemara, given the Lavzman Yisura, since it's not the time of Yisur, it's not the time of Biur Chametz, the burning of the Chametz, maybe you're going to be negligent. You're not going to make the Bitur. So the Gemara says on the top of Zayin Mudalev, just annul on the 6th hour. So says the Gemara, given the Yisura Banan and Levet, since it's Yisur Banan to do it, so therefore it's like Doraita, and therefore it's not in your possession, and therefore you cannot be Mevatel. And that's what we finished.